The blip on the long-range grid was not a ghost, it was a ship. Cyric Vos saw it first from the back of the command bridge, his feathers flat against his neck. The sensor readout gave a signature that matched nothing in the Dominion fleet's database. The radiation profile was too clean, the mass reading was too large, and the trajectory was too straight. The ship, if it was a ship, was coming from the direction of the Shroud, the dead sector. The place, the human evacuation convoy, had been destroyed 47 years ago. The Dominion had destroyed 7,443 ships there, every single one. That was the official count. It was in the record Cyric had studied the night before, sitting alone in his quarters, memorizing the numbers so he would not need to look at his slate during the audit. High Admiral Corvethan's voice cut through the bridge like a blade. Ghost. Their technology is archaic. He did not look up from his tactical display. Sending one ship is an act of desperation. They are trying to buy time. Cyric said nothing. He looked at the display again. The ship was moving slowly, not retreating, not attacking, just approaching. It had no shields up, no weapons targeted. Why is it coming this way? Cyric asked. He did not mean to speak aloud. The bridge went quiet. Vithin finally looked up. His eyes were pale, unblinking. The 3 parallel scars across his jaw caught the obsidian light. 17 inlaid victory marks gleamed on his chest armor, one for each star system he had conquered. He had not been wrong in 43 cycles. That was his count. Because they have nothing left to lose, Chronicler Vethin said. That is what desperation looks like. You record what happens next. That is your only job. The ship took 17 minutes to reach visual range. It was enormous, scarred, pitted. The hull was covered in impact marks that had not been repaired, weapon fire from battles long over. This was not a ship built for speed. It was built to be seen. Cyric zoomed the main visual feed. The human ship had a name painted on its side in faded letters. The Final Reckoning. He had never heard of it. He had studied every human vessel classification. He had memorized their fleet compositions, their tonnage, their tactical vulnerabilities. This name was not in any file. The bridge was silent as the ship transmitted on all Dominion frequencies. The voice that came through was human. Calm, flat. But Cyric heard something else in the final syllable. A weight, a holding, a stillness that had not been touched in decades. This is the Earth battleship, the Final Reckoning. We are here to observe. Do not act. The channel went dead. Cyric stared at the screen. A single human ship, alone in the dark, telling a fleet of 612 warships not to act. It was not a threat. It was not a plea. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the quiet certainty of someone who had already made their peace. Would you have called it desperation? That is what Cyric called it at first. But even as he thought the word, he was not sure he believed it. The ship did not raise shields. It did not target weapons. It simply sat in the middle of the Dominion fleet. It waited. I wish I could tell you it ended there. It didn't. Stay close. Cyric zoomed the visual feed again, adjusting for clarity. Through a cracked viewport on the human bridge, he could see figures moving slow, deliberate, unhurried. And he noticed something small, a screen on one of the helm consoles, a still image. A family standing in golden light, green grass, bright sun, a woman holding a child, a man with his arm around her shoulder. He did not understand why she kept it visible. It was not tactical. It was not a weapon. It was just a memory. A fragment of a life that should have ended 47 years ago. The minutes passed. 37 of them. The human ship did not move, did not speak, just sat there in the silence of deep space, a scarred monument to something Cyric could not name. High Admiral Vethin paced the bridge. His boots rang against the obsidian deck. He checked his tactical display again and again, as if the human ship might vanish. It did not. Tactician Thren, Vethin said. Status? The young Zarathian at the weapons console bared his teeth. Fleet is locked. Primary batteries charged. We can erase that ship in one volley. Then why have you not fired? Thren hesitated. It has not fired on us, Admiral. The fleet doctrine states we may not fire first on a vessel that has not declared hostile intent. Vithin turned. The weight of his gaze was physical. You question my authority. No, Admiral. I question the doctrine. Commander Sorrel stepped forward from the sensor station. Her pale stone skin caught the bridge light, 4 eyes blinking in sequence. Admiral, I found something. A file. From the Dominion Central Archives. Vithin did not look at her. We are in the middle of an operation, Commander. This file is related to the operation. Sorel held up a data slate, the final reckoning. Decommissioned 47 years ago, that is what the archive says. But the decommission order was never signed. It was just filed. Buried under 17 layers of administrative closure. Surik felt his feathers rise. He crossed the bridge to stand beside Sorel. May I see that? She handed him the slate. He scrolled through the file. The language was formal, bureaucratic, the kind of prose that killed meaning with precision. The ship had been scheduled for decommission. The order had been drafted, but someone had stopped it. Someone had written a note in the margin, in a language Surik did not recognize. Commander, he said, what does this say? Sorel leaned closer. Her lateral eyes focused on the annotation. It says, hold. Just that? Hold. Surik looked back at the human ship. 47 minutes had passed since its transmission. The bridge lights flickered once. Commander, Surik said. What else is in that file? Sorel scrolled deeper. Her four eyes widened. Her whisper voice dropped to something barely audible. The convoy, the 7,443 ships, they were not destroyed. The records were falsified. The beacon signals were still transmitting for 47 years. Every single ship. The destruction reports were... She stopped. They were fabricated. They were all fabricated. Surik's hands began to shake. He gripped the slate to steady them. Who fabricated them? There is a name on the final approval signature. Sorel zoomed in. It belongs to a Dominion auditor. Dead now, killed in a transit accident 14 cycles ago. But the signature was applied 17 days ago. 17 days. The same day the last human stronghold fell. The same day High Admiral Vethin had announced the complete pacification of Sector 9G. Admiral, Surik said, you need to see this. High Admiral Vethin was not listening. He had the tactical display zoomed to full. His voice boomed across the bridge, drowning out everything else. Weapons lock? All ships. Fire on my command. Sorel looked up from her slate. Admiral, wait. The archive. Silence. Advisor. Vethin did not turn. We do not negotiate with ghosts. We do not wait for primitives to decide our timetable. We are the Dominion. We are the loudest voice in this sector. And this ship, he pointed at the human vessel, will learn the cost of wasting our time. Surik looked at the human ship. He looked at the image on the helm console, the family in the golden light. The woman on the bridge had not moved. She was still standing at the viewport, her hand resting on the cracked edge of the screen. She was not afraid. She was remembering, and then the ship spoke again. But this time the transmission was not to the Dominion fleet. It was encrypted, targeted, a single signal, aimed at the dead sector, at the shroud, at the place where 7,443 ships had been destroyed. Vethin's hand rose to give the firing command. Admiral, Surik said, his voice louder than he intended. Something is happening. Vethin ignored him. The firing order was on his lips. The signal was not a weapon. It was a key. And far beyond the Dominion fleet, beyond the reach of their sensors, the dead began to move. The dead did not move fast. That was the first thing Surik noticed, the slowness of it. The sensors on the bridge registered them as they came, first as thermal signatures, then as mass readings, then as the unmistakable geometry of ships turning in formation. They emerged from the dust of the shroud like ghosts rising from a grave, one by one, then by the dozen, then by the hundred. Commander Sorel's four eyes locked onto her display. Her whisper voice rose to something sharp and brittle. Admiral, the convoy, the 7,443 ships. They are still there. They were never destroyed. High Admiral Vethin did not lower his hand. That is impossible. I saw the destruction reports myself. I signed the final audit. You signed the final audit 17 days ago, Admiral, Sorel said. That was the same day the archives were updated. But the data was old. It was 30 years old. Someone fed you a false record and called it current. The first of the convoy ships appeared on the main visual feed. It was old, scraped, battered by decades of drifting. But it was not a civilian vessel. It had weapons mounts, it had armor plating, it had the silhouette of a warship. The second ship came next, then the third, then a formation of 12, moving in perfect synchronization. They were not fleeing, they were not attacking. They were maneuvering into position. Surik gripped his data slate so hard his fingers ached. He watched the tactical display fill with human signatures. 612 Zarathian ships, 7,443 human ships. The numbers were not an estimate. They were a fact. The Dominion fleet was surrounded. Tactician Thren's sharp teeth ground together. Admiral, we are outnumbered. 11-1 at current count. If they fire, they will not fire, Vethin said, but his voice had lost its certainty. The words came out flat, hollow, as if they had been drained of meaning. They are civilians. Refugees. They cannot fight. Surik looked at the human ship, at the final reckoning, at the woman still standing at the viewport, her thumb tracing the edge of the cracked data slate, the family in golden light, the photograph that should not exist. He crossed to the communications console. The Dominion comm officer stepped aside without being asked. Surik accessed the human transmission logs. The encrypted signal had been sent on a frequency the Dominion did not monitor, a frequency reserved for something called emergency dispersal. What is emergency dispersal? He asked. The comm officer shook his head. I do not know, chronicler. It is not in our lexicon. Surik looked at Sorel. Commander, do you have the full archive file? She nodded. She transferred it to his slate. He scrolled through the records, past the fake destruction reports, past the forged signatures, past the administrative closure layers. He found a section labeled Operational Protocols. He found a subsection labeled Contingency, Dispersal. He read the first line and stopped breathing. The dispersal order is a 7-stage protocol, Surik said aloud. Stage 1, concealment. Stage 2, preservation. Stage 3, repositioning. Stage 4. He stopped. Stage 4 is formation. How many stages are there? Sorel asked. Surik scrolled down. The screen went blank. Then a single line appeared, written in the same margin hand as the note that said, Hold. Stage 7, surrender. Surik looked up. They have already written their surrender. It is in the file. Dated 47 years ago, the bridge went silent. Even the hum of the engines seemed to fade. High Admiral Vethin turned slowly. His pale eyes found Surik. What did you say? The convoy, Surik said. They were never evacuating. They were dispersing. They went into the shroud and they waited. They have been waiting for 47 years. Waiting for the signal. Waiting for the moment when the Dominion would finally surround itself. Vethin's jaw tightened. The scars on his face seemed deeper in the bridge light. That is a lie. You are a chronicler, not a tactician. You do not understand what you're seeing. Then help me understand, Surik said. Why did the auditor die 14 cycles ago but sign the destruction reports 17 days ago? Vethin opened his mouth. No sound came out. The silence stretched. It was not a comfortable silence. It was the silence of a man who had built his entire life on the conviction that he could not be wrong, and now stood in the middle of a lie he could not explain. Commander Sorel touched Surik's arm. Her whisper voice was barely audible. Surik, look at the human ship. He looked. The woman at the viewport had not moved, but she was no longer looking at the convoy. She was looking at the Zarathian fleet, at the 612 ships, at the Dominion's finest, assembled in a perfect ring around a single scarred vessel. She raised her hand. It was a small gesture, a wave. Not a threat, not a greeting, just acknowledgement. Admiral, Surik said, they are showing us something. They are showing us what they were always doing. Vethin said nothing. The encrypted signal had not been a call to arms. It had been a call to order. The convoy was not preparing to attack. They were preparing to show something. Something that was already written in the file. Sorel's fingers flew across her console. I am cross-referencing the dispersal protocol with the human communications network. They have a secondary channel. It is open. It is. She stopped. Her lateral eyes blinked twice in rapid succession. It is transmitting a single file. Send it to my slate, Surik said. The file arrived. It was a document. One page written in human language with a Zarathian translation appended. The title was simple. The translation was simpler. Terms of surrender. Surik read the first line, then the second, then the third. The undersigned representatives of the Terran Remnant. He stopped. His voice was shaking. The Terran Remnant. They are not the human empire. They are not the human resistance. They are the human remnant. The ones who survived. He read further. The terms were not a capitulation. They were an invitation. A request. A door that had been left open for 47 years. The Dominion could leave Sector 9G. It could return to its 29 star systems. It could continue its expansion elsewhere. The humans would not pursue. They would not retaliate. They would not seek revenge. All they asked was this: acknowledge that the convoy had never been a convoy. It had always been a fleet that chose patience over violence, a fleet that had the numbers to fight but the wisdom to wait. High Admiral Vethin took a step towards Sarek. His hand was raised, not in a firing command, but in something else. A demand, a plea. Give me that file. Sarek held it out. Vethin took it. He read it. He read it again. His eyes moved across the page. His shoulders, broad and armored, did not rise and fall. There was no breath. There was just stillness. This is a fabrication, Vethin said. It is dated, Sorel said quietly. It is signed. It has been authenticated by the Dominion's own archival systems. The Dominion's archival systems are not infallible. They have never been wrong before, Admiral. Not in your lifetime. Vethin slammed the slate onto the console. The screen cracked. The terms of surrender were still visible. Fractured now, the words split by the scar of his anger. I did not conquer 17 systems to be humiliated by a file, he said. I did not wear these 17 marks to be told that I was wrong. I am the High Admiral of the Zerathian Dominion. I do not surrender. I do not retreat. I do not wait. Sarek felt something shift in his chest. A cold weight that had been building since the first blip appeared. He had been recording this moment. He had been doing his job. But now, watching Vethin's certainty crumble, he realized something that the Empire had never taught him. Vethin was not afraid of the human ships. He was afraid of the human silence. The same silence that had been waiting for 47 years. The same silence that had just proven that the Dominion's loudest word, conquest, had no weight. Across the bridge, the Zerathian crew had stopped working. They were watching their admiral. They had never seen him struggle. They had never seen him hesitate. They had seen him conquer, command, condemn. They had never seen him unable to speak. Tactician Thren stepped forward. His voice was careful, measured. Admiral, the human ships are not preparing to fire. They are holding position. They are waiting for your answer? Sarek looked at the tactical display again. The numbers were still there. 612, 7,443. The gap between them was not just a count, it was a statement that had been waiting 47 years to be delivered. He watched the human ships hold their positions. They were not perfect. A few drifted slightly out of formation, old ships, tired engines, crews who had spent decades in hiding. But they corrected. They adjusted. They did not break. They are veterans, Sarek said, not refugees. Veterans of a war that never ended. They just stopped fighting for a while. Long enough to build a fleet. Long enough to... He stopped. Long enough to wait us out. Vethin's hand closed into a fist. His armor creaked. 17 victory marks caught the light as if mocking him. He did not order the attack. He could not. The fleet was surrounded. The numbers were undeniable. And the file with its forged signatures, its buried dates, its single word, hold, stared back at him from the cracked screen. Admiral, Sarek said, the file says they will not fire unless fired upon. They have held their position for 47 minutes. They will hold longer. They have already proven they can. Vethin looked at Sarek. His pale eyes were bright with something that might have been rage, or might have been fear, or might have been the slow creeping awareness of a certainty that had finally broken. You are a chronicler, Vethin said. You record. You do not advise. Sarek met his gaze. His feathers were flat against his neck. His hands were trembling. But his voice was steady when he spoke. I am recording, Admiral. I am recording what I see. And what I see is a fleet of 7,443 ships that have spent 47 years learning to wait. They are not afraid of your silence, Admiral. They are counting on it. Vethin turned away. He stared at the tactical display, at the sea of human signatures that had appeared from nowhere. At the ship that had been waiting for 47 years to deliver a message that should have been delivered a lifetime ago. The Dominion had a word for species that sent one ship to a battle. The word was desperate. The word was wrong. The word was patient, and patience, Sarek realized, was the loudest weapon in the universe. He looked at the human ship one more time. The woman at the viewport had not moved. Her hand was still raised. Her thumb still touched the cracked edge of the photograph. The family in golden light, the memory that had carried her through 47 years of waiting. She was not looking at the Dominion fleet. She was looking past it, at something only she could see, at a future that had been written 47 years ago. The file on Sarek's slate updated. A new line appeared in the margin, a single word, the same word that had been written there before, in the same hand, in the same ink. Hold. But this time, Sarek understood. The word was not an instruction. It was a promise. A promise that the waiting had an end. A promise that the silence would eventually be answered. High Admiral Vethan opened his mouth to speak, and for the first time in 43 cycles, he did not know what to say. The bridge held its breath. 6112 Zarathian crew members, all of them motionless, all of them watching their admiral, all of them waiting for the word that would either save them or end them. The word did not come. Vethan closed his mouth. He stared at the tactical display, at the 7,443 ships, at the silence that surrounded him, and Sarek Vos, fleet chronicler of the Zarathian Dominion, recorder of conquests, keeper of the official record, realized that he was watching not a battle, but the slow, quiet end of an empire's certainty. The war was over. It had been over 47 years ago. The humans had just been waiting to be asked. The bridge stayed quiet for another 17 seconds. Then High Admiral Kor Vethan spoke. All ships, hold position. Do not engage. His voice was flat, robotic. The voice of a man who had just discovered that every word he had ever spoken about the humans was a lie. He did not turn from the tactical display. He did not look at his crew. He just stood there, staring at the sea of human signatures, his 17 victory marks catching the light like scars that would not heal. Sarek watched him, watched the stillness in his shoulders. Watched the way his hand hung at his side, half closed, as if reaching for something that was no longer there. Admiral, Sarek said, the human terms are still open. They are waiting for a response. Vethan did not acknowledge him. The tactical display updated. The human ships were not holding formation anymore. They were shifting, not into an attack pattern. That would have been too obvious. They were shifting into something else, something slower, something deliberate. Commander Sorel leaned over her console. Her whisper voice was urgent. Sarek, the dispersal protocol. There is more. He crossed to her station. Show me. She pulled up the original file. The one with the hold annotation, the one that had been buried under 17 layers of administrative closure. She scrolled past the surrender terms, past the forged destruction reports, past the auditor's signature, the one applied 17 days ago by a dead man. Beneath all of it, there was one more layer, a final document, a note that had been appended 47 years ago in the same margin hand as the word hold. The note read, when they are ready to listen, send this. Below it was a single data crystal code, a transmission key. A frequency that the Dominion had never monitored because it was not a military channel. It was a civilian channel. A channel for families, for messages, for the kind of communication that the Zarathian Dominion had never considered a threat. Commander, Sarek said, what is on that frequency? Sorel's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. I do not know. It is not secured. It is just open. It has been open for 47 years. Sarek looked at the human ship, at the final reckoning, at the woman still standing at the viewport, her hand still touching the cracked data slate. Open it, he said. Sorel hesitated. That is a civilian channel. Chronicler, we are not authorized. Open it. She keyed the frequency. A low hum filled the bridge. Then a voice. Not the voice of Captain Thorne, not the voice of a soldier. A different voice. Softer, older. A voice that had been speaking for 47 years, to no one, in the hope that someday someone would listen. This is a message from the Terran remnant to any species who receives this transmission. We are not enemies. We are not conquerors. We are survivors. We left our home system 47 years ago because we knew we could not win a war. We did not leave to hide. We left to wait. To wait for the moment when the empire that hunted us would finally understand that we were never the threat. We were never the target. We were just the ones who refused to stop being human. The voice stopped. Then it continued. If you are hearing this, you are listening. That is all we ever asked. The bridge was silent. Even the hum of the engine seemed to have faded. Sarek felt his feathers rise. He looked at the tactical display. The human ships were still shifting, still moving into that slow, deliberate formation. But they were not preparing to attack. They were preparing to leave. Commander, he said, they are not surrounding us. They are giving us space. They are... He stopped. He understood. They are giving us a way out. Vethan turned. His pale eyes found Sarek. What are you saying? They are not here to fight, Sarek said. They have been waiting for 47 years, and they are not here to fight. They are here to show us what they were always doing. They were surviving, they were remembering. They were waiting for us to become something worth surrendering to. Vithan's jaw tightened. Surrender? To them? No, Surik said. Surrender to the truth that they were never helpless, the truth that they have had the numbers all along, the truth that they chose patience over vengeance. They are not asking us to admit defeat, Admiral. They are asking us to admit that we were wrong. The word hung in the air. Wrong. It was not a word that had ever been spoken on this bridge before. Not in Vithan's presence. Not in the presence of the man who had conquered 17 systems. Vithan's hand closed into a fist. His armor creaked. The 17 victory marks on his chest seemed to press against him, heavier than armor, heavier than metal. I'm not wrong, he said. I have never been wrong. I have the records to prove it. I have the marks to prove it. 17 systems, 17 conquests, 17 victories. The Dominion does not make mistakes. Surik stepped forward. His voice was quiet. The Dominion does not make mistakes. But the Dominion makes records. Records that can be forged. Records that can be buried. Records that can be signed by dead men 17 days after they died. Vithan's eyes narrowed. You are accusing me of. I am accusing no one, Surik said. I am stating a fact. The file is there. The dates are there. The signatures are there. You signed the final audit, Admiral. You signed it 17 days ago, but the data you signed was 30 years old. The ships were not destroyed. They were never destroyed. You signed a lie. The bridge crew stared at Surik. No one spoke. No one moved. They had heard the chronicler speak, but they had never heard him speak like this. They had seen him record. They had seen him observe. They had never seen him accuse. Vithan took a step toward him. His voice was low, dangerous. You are a chronicler. You have no authority to... I have the authority of what I see, Surik said. I have the authority of what I record. And what I am recording now is not a victory, Admiral. It is the end of one. Vithan stopped. His face was a mask of something unreadable. Rage, perhaps, or fear, or the slow, creeping awareness that the man who had never been wrong was standing in the middle of a lie that he had helped create. Chronicler, he said, if you continue down this path, you will not be recording history. You will be making it, and I will not allow that. Surik met his gaze. You will not allow it? Admiral, there are 7,443 ships outside that viewport. They have been waiting 47 years to be heard. You cannot silence them. You cannot silence me. The truth is already recorded. The file is already archived. The word is already written. Sorel stepped between them. Her whisper voice was calm, measured. Admiral? We need to respond to the human transmission. They are holding formation. They are waiting. They are not threatening. They are offering. Vithan looked at Sorel, then at Surik, then at the tactical display. The human ships had stopped shifting. They were holding a wide perimeter, a perimeter that gave the Dominion fleet space. Space to move, space to think, space to decide. Admiral, Sorel said, what is your response? Vithan opened his mouth. For a long moment, no sound came out. Then he closed his mouth. He turned away from the viewport. He walked to his command chair. He sat down. His voice was hollow when he finally spoke. Open a channel to the final reckoning. Tactician Thren keyed the channel. Channel open, Admiral. Vithan stared at the human ship, at the scarred hull, at the faded name, at the woman still standing at the viewport, her hand still touching the cracked data slate. This is High Admiral Kor Vithan of the Zarathian Dominion, he said. I acknowledge your transmission. I acknowledge your fleet. I acknowledge he stopped. The word caught in his throat, he swallowed. I acknowledge that the terms of surrender have been received. The human ship did not respond immediately. The seconds stretched. Surik watched the woman at the viewport. She had not moved, but something had changed in her stillness. A shift, a softening. Then Captain Thorne's voice came through the channel, calm, flat, but with something new beneath it, relief. Thank you, Admiral. The Terran remnant accepts your acknowledgement. Vithan's voice was sharp. I have not surrendered. We did not ask you to, Thorne said. We asked you to listen. You listened. That is enough. That is all we ever needed. Vithan stared at the screen. He stared at the woman at the viewport. He stared at the 7,443 ships that had surrounded his fleet and then given him space. The silence stretched. Surik watched Vithan's face. The certainty that had once been carved into his features was gone. In its place was something else, something rawer. Something that looked like the beginning of understanding. The human ships began to move. They were not attacking, they were not retreating. They were turning, slowly, quietly, one by one. The 7,443 ships of the Terran remnant, the convoy that had been evacuating for 47 years, the fleet that had been waiting to be acknowledged, they turned away from the Dominion. They turned toward the shroud, toward the dust, toward the silence. Sir Rick watched them go. He watched the woman at the viewport lower her hand. He watched her touch the cracked edge of the photograph one last time. The family in golden light, the memory she had carried through 47 years of waiting. She was not looking at the Dominion fleet anymore. She was looking at the photograph, at the light, at the green, at the faces she had not seen in decades. She was remembering. And then she turned away from the viewport, and the transmission ended. The bridge was silent. Sir Rick closed his data slate. His hands were shaking, but he did not try to hide them anymore. He looked around the bridge, at the Zarathian crew still frozen, still watching their admiral. At Sorel, her 4 eyes blinking slowly, her whisper voice still not having spoken the question that hung in the air. At Vethin, sitting in his command chair, his 17 victory marks dull in the obsidian light. "Admiral," Sarek said, "the fleet is no longer surrounded. The humans are leaving. You may give the order to return to Dominion space whenever you're ready." Vethin did not speak. He stared at the empty space where the human ships had been, at the dark, at the silence. The Dominion fleet was 612 ships of certainty. Vethin said, his voice was quiet. Almost to himself, the human convoy was 7,443 ships of patience. The difference was the sound they made. He looked at Sir Rick. His pale eyes were not pale anymore. They were something else, something that looked like the beginning of a man who had just discovered that he could be wrong. "Chronicler," he said, "what do you record?" Sir Rick looked at his slate, at the notes he had taken, at the words he had written. "I record what I saw, Admiral. I record what I heard. I record that the human fleet was not destroyed. I record that they waited 47 years to be acknowledged. I record that they offered surrender, not as a threat, but as an invitation. I record that they did not fire a single shot." He paused. "I record that they chose silence over vengeance." Vithin was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded, a small movement, almost invisible. "Then record this as well," he said. "Record that I was wrong." Surik did not write the words. He did not need to. The words were already written in the silence, in the stillness, in the absence of the ships that had been waiting for 47 years. The Zarathian fleet sat in the dark, 612 ships, 612 silences. They did not move. They did not speak. They just waited, as the humans had waited, for the moment when the silence would finally be answered. And Sarek Vos, fleet chronicler of the Zarathian Dominion, recorder of conquests, keeper of the official record, understood something that he had not understood before. The humans had not won. The Dominion had not lost. The war had simply ended, and the only thing left was the quiet. He looked at the empty viewport, at the dark, at the silence. The humans had said one thing that he could not stop thinking about. They had said, "If you are hearing this, you are listening. That is all we ever asked." He had heard, he had listened, and he had recorded, but the recording was not the end of it. The recording was only the beginning. Because now, for the first time in his life, he was not just recording history, he was carrying it. The fleet was still silent. Vithin had not given the order to return. He was sitting in his command chair, staring at the empty space where the human ships had been. "I gave the order to fire," Vithin said. "I raised my hand, I was going to destroy them, and then they sent the signal and the ships appeared." He stopped. "I have been wrong about a lot of things, chronicler, but I have never been wrong about the cost of being wrong. I know what happens to admirals who lose. I know what happens to empires that are surrounded. I know what happens to conquerors who are conquered." Surik said nothing. He waited. Vethin continued. His voice was raw. "I had a choice. They gave me a choice. They could have killed us all. They could have ended the Dominion. They had the numbers. They had the patience. They had 47 years of silence to fuel their hatred, and they did not fire. They turned. They gave us space. They gave us a way out." He looked at Sarek. "Why?" Sarek thought about the woman at the viewport, about the photograph, about the family in golden light, about the memory she had carried through 47 years of waiting. "Because they did not want to conquer you, Admiral," Sarek said. They wanted you to listen. They wanted you to understand that they were never the enemy. They wanted you to see what they had always known. Vithan's voice was barely audible. What did they know? Sirik looked at the empty viewport, at the dark, at the silence. They knew that the loudest empires are the ones that cannot hear themselves, he said. They knew that the silence was not a weapon, it was a mirror. They waited 47 years for you to look into it. Vithan sat in his chair. He did not move, he did not speak. The silence stretched, and Sirik, for the first time in his life, did not know what to record. Sirik sat in the recording bay, his data slate open on the desk before him. The silence of the will of Zarath was different now. Not the tense silence of a bridge waiting for orders, but the hollow silence of a fleet that had just learned it was no longer at war. He had been sitting here for 23 minutes. He had not written a single word. The bay was small, windowless. The walls were lined with archive crystals, each one containing the record of a conquest, a victory, a system brought under Dominion control. Sirik had added 17 of those records himself. He had watched High Admiral Vithan conquer each one. He had recorded the speeches, the surrenders, the ceremonies. He had never once questioned what he was recording. He looked at his slate. The screen was blank except for the cursor blinking at the top of the page. He had no words for what he had seen, no category for it. No frame in the Dominion's vast archives that could hold the truth of 7,000 ships rising from the dead. Vithan had not left the bridge. Sirik had seen him as he walked out, still sitting in his command chair, still staring at the empty viewport. The Admiral had not moved. He had not spoken. He had just sat there, his 17 victory marks dull and useless in the dim light. A knock on the bay door. Sirik looked up. Commander Sorrel stood in the doorway. Her 4 eyes blinked in the low light. She held a data crystal in her pale stone hand. "Chronicler," she said, "I thought you might want this." She set the crystal on the desk. Sirik recognized it immediately. It was the transmission key. The civilian channel, the one that had been open for 47 years. "The frequency is still active," Sorrel said. "The humans left it open. I think they wanted someone to keep listening." She turned to leave, then she paused. "Sirik, what are you going to record?" He looked at the blank slate, at the cursor blinking on the page. "I don't know yet," he said. Sorrel nodded. She left without another word. Sirik picked up the data crystal. He turned it over in his fingers. It was warm. Not from the room. The bay was cold, always cold. The warmth came from somewhere else, from the transmission. From the voice that had been speaking for 47 years. He inserted the crystal into his slate. The file opened. It was the same message he had heard on the bridge, the same soft voice, the same words, but this time there was more, a second layer. A message beneath the message. He scrolled down. The screen flickered, and then he saw it. A single image. A photograph. The same photograph he had seen on the helm console of the Final Reckoning. A family standing in golden light. Green grass, bright sun. A woman holding a child, a man with his arm around her shoulder. But there was something else in this version. A note. Handwritten. In the same margin script as the word hold. The note said, "We are not a record. We are a reminder of what we carried. Of what we chose to carry. Of what we will always carry." Sirik stared at the photograph, at the faces, at the light, at the family that had been frozen in golden time for 47 years. He had seen it before, but he had not understood it. He had thought it was a memory. A fragment of a life that had ended. It was not. It was a promise. A promise that the humans had carried through 47 years of waiting. A promise that they had not been fighting a war. They had been carrying a world. He closed his eyes. He thought of the woman at the viewport, of her thumb tracing the cracked edge of the image, of the stillness in her face. She was not afraid. She was remembering. But remembering was not the same as holding on. Remembering was the act of carrying something forward, of keeping it alive, of making sure it survived. He reached for his stylus. He set the crystal beside his slate. He looked at the photograph one more time, at the family in the golden light, at the note, at the words that had been written 47 years ago by someone who knew that one day someone would listen. He began to write. The war ended today. Not with a surrender, not with a victory. It ended with a silence, the kind of silence that comes after a long wait. The kind of silence that has been waiting longer than anyone knew. He stopped. He read the words back. They were true, but they were not enough. He looked at the photograph again, at the family, at the light, at the woman holding the child. He did not know their names. He would never know their names, but he understood something now that he had not understood before. Name means nothing, he wrote. The Empire will ask. Who were they? What were their numbers? Their tonnage? Their tactical value? None of that matters. What matters is what they carried. They carried a photograph. They carried a memory. They carried a world that no longer existed, and they refused to let it go. That is not a weakness. That is the slowest form of strength. He wrote for 10 minutes, then 20, then 40. The words came faster now, pouring out of him in a way they never had before. He was not recording history, he was not chronicling a conquest, he was writing the truth. The Empire's loudest weapon was always silence. He wrote, but the silence was never ours, it was theirs. They lent it to us, they gave us 47 years of quiet in which to learn what we had done, and when we finally stopped shouting, we heard them for the first time. He stopped. He looked at the photograph again. The family was still there, still frozen in golden light, still carrying their memory forward. He picked up the slate. He walked to the door. He had one more thing to record. The bridge was empty except for Vethan. The admiral had not moved from his chair. He was still staring at the viewport, still watching the dark where the human ships had been. His hands were resting on the armrests. His armor was dull. The 17 victory marks were no longer gleaming. Sarek crossed the bridge. He stopped beside the command chair. He did not speak. Vethan did not look at him. Chronicler, he said, I have been thinking about what you said about the mirror. Sarek waited. I have conquered 17 systems, Vethan said. I have led the Dominion to its greatest heights. And I have never once looked in a mirror. I have never once asked myself what I was becoming. He turned. His pale eyes found Sarek's. They were not pale anymore. They were something else, the color of someone who had looked into the silence and seen his own reflection. What am I? Chronicler. Sarek looked at him, at the admiral who had conquered 17 systems, at the man who had been wrong for the first time in 43 cycles, at the one who had just asked the most human question of all. Admiral, Sarek said, I am not sure you are the one who needs to answer that. Vethan was quiet for a long moment, then he nodded. It was a small movement, almost invisible. Chronicler, he said, what are you recording? Sarek looked at the photograph. At the family in the golden light, at the note that said, we are a reminder. I am recording the truth, he said. I am recording that the humans were never the enemy. I am recording that they waited 47 years to be heard. I am recording that they chose silence over vengeance. I am recording that the loudest empires are the ones that cannot hear themselves, he paused. And I'm recording that High Admiral Vethan, for the first time in 43 cycles, looked into the mirror and saw himself. Vethan's jaw tightened. His hand closed into a fist. Then it opened again. Record that, he said. Record that I was wrong. Record that I was the one who did not listen. Record that the Dominion's greatest mistake was not underestimating the humans. It was underestimating the weight of a memory. Sarek wrote it down. Every word. He did not ask if Vethan meant it. He did not question the sincerity of the Admiral's confession. He just recorded. That was his job. That had always been his job. But now, for the first time, it was also his choice. He walked back to the recording bay. He sat down at the desk. He looked at the photograph. At the family. At the light. He touched the edge of the screen. He traced the face of the child. He did not know the child's name. He would never know the child's name. But he knew what the child had carried. He wrote his final line. He closed the slate. He sat in the quiet, and for the first time he understood. The Empire had never been loud. It had only been drowning out the silence. He looked at the photograph one last time. The family was still there, still frozen in golden light, still carrying their memory forward. He did not file the record. He did not send it to the archives. He kept it. He kept it because the silence was not something to drown out. It was something to listen to. He set the slate down. His hands were still. For the first time in 47 cycles of recording conquests, he was not recording the Empire's certainty. He was recording the quiet, the silence, the end.